Thank you. We have a guest with us today, Mr. McCoy, and he has come today to talk about a number of topics with us: Gentoo, Kali, and CoreOS. Now, that might be new to a few of you here, and so be sure that you ask lots of questions at the end, as many as possible to be asked for. And
Incentive.
okay, well, we'll see how he wants you to ask a lot of questions, but I'm excited about today's performance, and so we're glad that you are here, and we'll turn it over to you, all right? Thank you.
So as she said, I'm going to be presenting about the holy trinity of Linux distros. I'm going to be talking about CoreOS, Kali Linux, and Gentoo. Gentoo Linux is similar to Arch with being a build your own or a meta distribution. It is mostly designed for more avid Linux users, people who are much more familiar with the Linux environment. And for installation, Gentoo also is a step-by-step installation. For Kali Linux, it is a specialty distribution designed for hacking and pen testing. It holds over 800 pen testing tools that are all open source and fully available for you to use. And like Gentoo, it's, I say this ironically, but Kali is not meant for newbie users of Linux, it's meant for people with experience. CoreOS is a distribution designed for clustering applications and deploying clusters. It's similar to emulation and virtualization. Interesting facts about Gentoo. It was created by Daniel Robbins and was originally named Enoch. Not after the Enoch that was sent up to heaven. That was just similar to Kali, that was just a random naming scheme that they decided to give it. It was eventually named after Gentoo, which is the fastest swimming penguin, which is right there. And it was designed to have multiple pre-compiled binaries to grant the OS versatility, and so that it can better adapt to either small or big or multiple machines as otherwise. It was first released 18 years ago, on July 25, 2000, and a new version was being released every 1 to 2 months. But on August 5, 2003, a Gentoo reference platform was released. On March 1st, 2004, by 4 releases, but then was changed back in March 2005 to have a semi-release from then on, which means it only has one release every half of every year. Yeah. With Gentoo being a meta distribution, it means that you have to build upon it yourself. So everything about it, like Arch, is completely up to the user's choice, so as to whether or not what they should have for the architecture, just like for the memory manager, for example. The process manager is also up to the user, but most of the time the one that was designed for Gentoo was called OpenRC, but I'm much more familiar with systemd. It's because systemd is the most common amongst all of them. It's really easy to manage the system using run levels, but those are run levels are what are the states that your computer is supposed to run in. So run level 0 is telling your computer to shut down. Run level 6 is telling it to reboot. Run level 5 is telling it to run in a state to where it can only read the hard drive, but it can't write to it. Kind of like safe mode in Windows. The file system is also up to the user. these are some possibilities, just like ext4, which is very common amongst Linux distros. Encrypt is an enterprise cryptographic file system for Linux, which it's supposed to automatically encrypt files for everything that's either put in or taken out. And this one is designed by Samsung, and it's one that's mostly designed for solid-state drives or USBs or SD cards because they use flashing. Device management is also up to the user, but there's really only two that are readily available. There's UDEV and there's EUDEV, which is just a European fork of UDEV. But it is highly recommended that you don't change anything on UDEV because it can lead to drastic consequences. GNU Desktop is also up to the user. For mine, on my Gentoo installation, it uses XFCE. But of course, there's GNOME, which is common amongst like Kali, for example, or Ubuntu. This is the one that I'm currently using, and KDE is really is mainly used by Raspberry Pi or Pixel. Interesting facts about Kali. Kali, in 2015, before 2016, it was called Backtrack, and it had the same logo, but it was more of a reddish theme, and it was based on Ubuntu up until 2016, until they switched to Debian. And yeah, Kali's name has no real meaning to it, so it's not like a reference to the Hindu god or anything. That's just what they decided to name it. On Kali version 1.01 through 9, this is back for Backtrack, and it was when EFI support was just implemented, and it also included encrypted installs and encrypted persistence. And persistence is mostly what you give to a live disk installation of Kali, which is when you install it on a USB stick. And adding persistence means that any changes that you make will stay permanent, as in contrast to it being completely volatile. Kali has many supported platforms like Android, USB drives, and the Raspberry Pi. ARM devices like the Raspberry Pi are mostly designed for DUI projects, and you can, with ARM devices, it helps with mobility. So what a lot of people do is they will make a hacking station with a Raspberry Pi and have it be mobile to where they can take their hacks on the go. The USB drives, like I said earlier, is mostly designed for live file systems, which those are actually can be more versatile than ARM devices, because you can stick the USB drive within any system and boot to it, which some hacks are better performed from a live file system than from an actual installation on a machine, such as that. And Android phones. It's mostly designed for earlier models of phones like the Nexus, but Kali Linux does have a Android operating system called Kali NetHunter, where it's not quite the same as that one, but it does have a lot of various tools that they're not all the same, but they can mainly perform the same function. For Kali, the process manager is systemd. It of course, manages the run levels, which tells the state to run in. It also hosts the service manager as to it hosts the service manager to tell which services to start on boot up. An example would be SSH, for example. It also helps bootstrap the operating system to the machines that can actually run from the machine. Kali uses a file system known as Natalis for a machine installation. For ARM, it uses FAT32. For USB and Android, it uses FAT32. And desktop uses ext4. And like all file systems, it does depend on the partition scheme for the partitions that your USB drive, or ARM device is divided into. Examples of these partitions is the boot partition, the swap partition, the root file system, and the EFI partition. This, of course, is responsible for the boot partition. The swap is part of the grub bootloader, which is what makes it to where it can choose amongst the different operating systems to boot from. And the root file system is just this whole schematic of starting from the roots all the way down to the tree. And the EFI I can't quite remember what that one is. For Kali Device Manager, all devices work almost automatically, but since it's Linux, some devices may require different drivers in order to run at optimum capability. And of course, it's all managed through UDEV, the device file system. The Kali desktop. The GUI is not optional, and it uses Genome. And it comes pre-installed, and it comes right at boot, and it takes around 1 gig or more so of RAM to support. Interesting facts about CoreOS. CoreOS is updated as a whole, not as a package, because of how lightweight of an operating system that it is. CoreOS also has no package manager, but it is pre-installed with Git, so that it can use Git repositories, which is where you're going to always get your packages from. Red Hat has it recently acquired CoreOS back in 2015, and it has been implemented in their infrastructure, and they're, of course, using it for emulation, virtualization, and containerizing. CoreOS was founded in 2013, and it was designed with the intention of making the internet more faster and a lot more secure. It only had basic maintenance updates for just improvement. On January 30th, 2015, Red Hat had acquired CoreOS. CoreOS also uses systemd, but the run level manager works a little bit differently, because for every single run level that you use, for the safety of the system and just to make sure that the entire cluster can be shut down safely, it has a 300-second delay before it actually completes the run level. And the process manager is much more different for the scheme of CoreOS, because with the deploying of cluster machines, it uses a selection process known as etcd, which what that does is it chooses which one is to be the master node and which ones are to be the worker nodes. The worker nodes get assigned a task by the master node and is then carried out by the worker nodes. And if one of the worker nodes is, or if the master node is to go down for any particular reason, etcd automatically allots a new master node to assign the tasks. The root file system is ext4, and this is actually really interesting right here. This is how it actually applies the updates. These are all, like A and B for the USRs are switched out for every update, so that if A is being used up, the update goes into B and then is applied through B into the data, and then A gets allotted for the next update. So that when the next one comes, it just switches out back and forth. Like I said before, udev is also the standard user for the device manager. It, of course, manages, it's part of the master node for determining how to utilize the worker nodes. And it does that through, of course, etcd, which is used for assigning a leader. CoreOS has no GUI or display. It's all CLI, which I'm not complaining at all, because CLI, I heavily prefer CLI over GUI. And finally, Gentoo. I see. For the Gentoo installation, for the first phase of it, you have to, of course, see what kind of architecture that you want for the boot process, which is GPT, which is the guided partitioning tool, and MBR, which is for master boot record. And the partition scheme is, of course, the scheme at which your disk is allotted just into segments in order to install the essential components of the operating system. The two tools that you can use to do this are parted and fdisk, but I just use parted, and I had to allot each one into each of these partitions in order to give it the right partition scheme so that it can actually boot. Stage 3 is it's where you get your file system. You can it's Gentoo's compiled file system that you can get from the Gentoo website, and you typically install it from tar. And the C flags and the CXX flags are, it's a configuration file that you have to edit so that you can tell it to do the right architecture, whether it's a 32-base or a 32-bit system or 64 to 86. And during this phase, this is when you under the actual disk that you're installing it on. In order to do this, you have to mount the disk. You have to mount the disk but you have to do it through the file system. So for example, you have to say mount dev SDA1 through mount and then Gentoo for the file system, and then it will show up. Chi rooting is when you reassign the root of the system, which you have to do that so that it won't accidentally install to the USB drive. That was the incident that I had. And PS1 is the protocol that Chi rooting uses to reassign it on the disk. And Gentoo has a relatively vast array of system profiles, and with these profiles you can choose whether or not to have it just be a CLI or a GUI. And with these profiles you can also choose what kind, like with each profile that you select, it'll tell the system which one to prepare for in terms of GUI. So you can choose a genome GUI or a KDE GUI. But the approach that I took for this was, I chose a generic GUI profile so that I could install it after I was done, because I just wanted to go for the minimal installation at first before I actually tried to go for the full-blown installation. Before I actually tried to put a GUI on. And local is where you have to set your time zone, and so that it can determine what servers to use for the repositories. And in this phase, this is when you have to, it's mostly when you install the drivers of the operating system. It's where you tell the operating system to install the required file systems, to use SCSI, to use PDP-OP drivers, SMP support, and HID support. It's also where you can enable the GTP or UEFI support, and at the end of it, you have to wait for it to compile and install. And for the system configuration, it's you have to install your it's where you configure your network. For that one, I did install Network Manager because I'm familiar with it, but instead I just decided to go with DHCP CD. And in this phase, you also have to create your hosts, and set your passwords. This is also where you have to set up the run level, and with your services at boot, that's where you can manage the service manager to run your services at boot, like such as a display manager. And you can also include wireless services, which are there to configure your wireless interfaces. The final part of the Gentoo installation is installing the bootloader. I of course installed Grub2 because that's the one I mostly use, but there are other options like Lilo, Syslinks, And then it's not the same, like, a bootloader is not the same as the BIOS or an EFI, because BIOS and EFI don't utilize swap partitions the same way that bootloaders do. And then after you're done with all that, it should boot after you're finished. And this is my Gentoo installation right here. Kali. Gentoo uses, for its package repositories, it uses something called Emerge. It uses Emerge and Portage, as seen in your handouts. Installing a application is relatively easy. All you have to do is say Emerge, and then if you say -- ask, it will prompt you, are you sure you want to do this? And let's say I wanted to install Git. I just realized I didn't connect to the internet. But it would prompt you through all of it if you're saying, would you like to install it? But I already have Git installed.
What is your, can you just connect it through a wire? I'll just take that one off the computer down there real quick.
Sometimes it locks the port if you plug in a machine and it's
Yeah,
not.
I mean, it didn't for me, it worked just fine for me. So, I maybe thought you might give it a shot. Just so you can show us different stuff.
And I tried to install the font, but I installed Xterm, which it won't let me change the font.
Oh, so that's why you can't make it larger, you mean?
Yeah, it doesn't want to do it.
Like you do the DHCP CD command through Ethernet.
I also installed Mozilla Firefox through the merge process. So, like I said before, you can say merge ask and then say git, for example, and then we'll check the dependencies, which that will take maybe around 30 seconds to a minute.
What's it doing right now?
It's calculating its dependencies to figure out what needs to be installed for this to actually work. For Git to actually work.
Do you think it will actually work since I already did it once?
Should. I mean, it should say it's already installed.
So we'll find the dependencies for any package to install.
Typically, if it's okay if you don't know the name of something, as long as you like know at least some part of its name. So, because the naming scheme for this is kind of weird, because it will say, it'll be like system dash utils, and then it'll say it'll say system utils slash, and then the name of the system utility, because it's categorized. But if you don't know it, if you don't know it for sure, and you just, if Git wasn't installed here before, and I just installed it then, it would say, that wasn't found, but here is something similar.
Now, can I pause you just a moment? I don't mean to interrupt, but let's make sure we know what we're looking at. This is way back. We're on Gentoo Linux, and we're on the terminal, which is a special terminal you installed, named
Extern.
Xterm, so that might be slightly different than some that you have used. And we just watched you connect to the internet, but you went out and grabbed a DHCP number from whatever network you're on to make this functional, and now you just installed. Did I follow all that so far? Yeah, making sure.
And even this, I had to install the entire graphical user interface. But the invocation command for that one was exfce is startx exce 4.
And how did you leave how did you get out of, did you just,
I just logged out of that.
oh, I see.
So I have 2 questions about that. Do you have to manually go into your XFCE your GUI every time you log in?
Yes, but that is my choice.
Nice.
Because the reason why I kept it that way, because it was similar to how older versions of Noobs was for Raspbian, and so I just liked being able to go into the CLI right away, because then I could easily choose if I wanted to have a CLI or not.
And the other question was about like XFCE. So like you're logged in as in like, oh, this is just a session of XFCE.
I'm logged in as root.
Oh, so okay, that makes sense.
I am logged in as
So when you turned off your GUI, you did not log yourself out, truly out of the system.
yeah. In order to log yourself out completely, you have to log out of the GUI, and then you have to type in the command logout bracket and bracket, and then it'll clear it for you. Apparently something's hilarious.
Yeah, so, well, when you said something about root, it was something that Austin said that was funny. It related to it, but it was funny.
And now I'm logged into my second user, just called Gentoo. And even from here,
What's the 4 have to do with it?
that's the version of XFCE that I'm using. And then I have the GUI on my other user.
Nice. So just added it to both of them, huh? And you could have added a different GUI to the other user, correct?
Yeah, I could have.
Does that symbol?
It would take a long time if I was to do it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how long did it initially take you to install the GUI?
GUI, I'm not entirely certain because I left, because I knew it would take a while, but normally it takes maybe around half an hour.
Yeah, we do.
You mean to pull all the files together and then compile it, make it usable?
Yeah, and that's when you install, because then you also install like all the XFCE applications as well that came with it. Yeah, it takes a long time.
The thing that took the longest was compiling and installing the kernel. because I had to get all the drivers and all the components that you selected yes on.
How long did it take to compile the kernel, do you think?
It was definitely an overnight thing.
It's a lot.
I don't know, maybe like 14 hours.
Yeah, that sounds
Keep that in mind if you ever have to recompile. It's not always a speedy event.
And that was with well, the reason why it was so long was because of the profile that I had selected with the generic desktop. If it was the minimal, it wouldn't have taken even near that long. Is there anything that you guys would like to, is there anything else that you guys would like to see done on it? Before I switch.
Can you show us a configuration file in that environment that you may have worked on?
The one I did have to work on was the one for the X term, because it originally had a, it was originally white with black characters. And the command I just used was the command that's on the back of your thing called locate. I looked at it because I can't quite remember where it is. I actually did it, I did this one as well for my, second user. I just went ahead and gave myself all the privileges.
Okay?
Which typically isn't the safest thing to do.
Well, no, we understand most environments you wouldn't want to do that. You said you had changed something about CL flags or whatever, is that what you're talking about?
Can you maybe search what you're looking for?
It's all right, I don't necessarily see those right now, you can show them to me later. So you installed the GUI. What, can you talk a little bit more about what you said CH routing was? I think you called it chrooting. Chrooting.
It's a part of the installation process because up before that point, the root of the file system is on the USB drive until you chroot onto the root file system on the disk and queue that you're using, and then that will reassign the root to be from the hard drive rather than the USB drive.
So it's spelled CH routing, so it's probably change routing is what that whole command is about, okay? And trying to choose where the root, it hasn't, not doing anything to do with permission per se of the root, it's just where the root drive is. All right, well, that's all the questions right now. Well, we may come back and ask some about your slides, but that's all of Gentoo right now for me.
Installing all of this came from the stage 3 that I had talked about earlier, because it's the compressed down version of your entire file system, and all you have to do for that is extract it. So in this segment, I'm going to be demonstrating a couple of Kali tools.
So now we've moved to a Kali installation.
Are we supposed to see something on the screen?
I'm trying to see if I can change that font. I think I should. And the first one that I'm going to show is,
To make it easier on you, you probably duplicate the screen, could you? Or can you not do that?
I'm going to try.
Yeah, that was.
It is a automated tool called, actually, before I do that, I'm gonna use a tool called Airmon NG. And Airmon NG is just a tool that makes it to where you can switch your Wi-Fi card or dongle into injective mode or monitor mode.
You might want to explain those modes.
Monitor mode and injective mode are the same thing, but it's when you're able to see. It's when you're able to see all the packets between. It's when you're able to see the handshakes from the router and such, being able to see the WPS exchange between devices and all that. So being able to
Is that the same as promiscuous mode? That's what some network
Sort of.
cards call it, when it's out pursuing and watching and looking.
promiscuous mode. And so right now I'm saying Airmon NG start WLNAO, which is my wireless interface. You have to specify the interface, otherwise it won't work. And right now it is in monitor mode, but Network Manager doesn't like that. But I also don't like killing the Network Manager process, because then after I'm done using this, I can't just go back and turn it back on, because even if I type in the command, it won't work. I just have to reboot the entire system.
So what should we be seeing, or what should we be paying attention to? I know what we're seeing.
Right now, these are the suggested processes that it recommended that I kill
Mhm.
by using Airmon NG check kill, and that will kill all processes that can be hindrance, but I don't like doing that.
Right.
And so, so right now, Network Manager would conflict with it. And so in order to fix that, I will say, it also changes the name of the WLNAO to WLNAO mon, just to specify that it's in monitor mode. And I'm gonna tell it using ifconfig to shut that interface down.
What was it interfering with?
It's because Network Manager doesn't like it when you go into promiscuous mode, so it would hinder my ability to actually see anything in promiscuous mode. And so right now what I'm doing now is I'm using a different command called iwconfig, which is used specifically for wireless devices, and I'm manually changing its mode from regular to monitor. And then after that's done, all I have to do is say up, and then it's back up. And so right now, with Wi-Fi, it is, it's at least trying to scan, but there isn't very much here. And so, and then it says press Control C when you're done, and
So it's scanning the Wi-Fi, most of you already are there, but scanning the Wi-Fi, looking at all the different packets that are being sent right now, out and about on the eight, are you on, which network are you on, private or,
Right now, I'm not on any network,
okay,
because right now it's just looking for any, to see if a router has WPS on, if there's any clients on it right now, what MAC address for it is, and right here, this is telling it what the signal strength of it is, and WPS, which is wireless, is wireless protected security.
so is it checking your own network card to see what it's receiving?
And so this is telling you how much, this is how, it's the signal strength. And so if it's green, it's good, if it's red, it's really bad. And right here, the WPS, it also checks to see if that is enabled, but it doesn't tell you if WPS is actually locked. The reason why I don't prefer people, like, it's probably in your best interest to turn WPS off is because of how easily it can be cracked, because all it is a 7-digit number. But if I, for example, wanted to see, it's because after a certain amount of attempts, it will lock so that you can't crack it. So it'll only give you like maybe 3 attempts, and the first time it locks, it'll give you like it'll lock for maybe an hour. But the more you try, the more it locks. After the third try, it'll become permanent until the router restarts. But if you want to see if it's locked or not, use a tool called wash, and it uses you have to use a tag for it called -I, which is -int, which is I for interface. And so you can run that, and it will go through. And right here where it says LCK or lock, it'll tell you whether or not it's been locked or not. And so right now, none of these have been locked.
Well, Joel, I'm just a tad bit confused by your explanation a little bit. We're on Cali, and these are special Wi-Fi tools that are checking out the signals. I got that. And you said we're not on the internet right now? We're not on a router, but then you're using the word router. So can you clarify those two things for me a little?
So when you're in this kind of when you're in router mode, it disconnects you because it disables your DHCP.
Okay, so it's just looking at itself.
And right now it's looking at all the available networks using monitor mode, which is helping it see all this information.
So it is talking to some kind of Wi-Fi device though.
Yeah, but we're not connected.
But we haven't said, yes, please connect and make that go through. But it is connecting, just not out to the internet. Is that what you're saying? It's not really saying, let me be one, but it knows about it.
It is communicating, but it's not part of the LAN.
Right, that's what I think we're both saying. But it's still communicating, it's still working, they're still out there. Okay, carry on.
So, the really nice thing about Wi-Fi is that it's pretty much all automated for the whole entire process. And so, I will choose number 5 because it's my network. And right now it's I had disabled WPS on mine because it's a very easy thing to crack because it takes maybe around 8 hours at the most to be able to crack a pre-shared key. But so what it had done instead is it went to look at the WPA handshake, which that is exchanged between a device and the router, and it's exchanged when a device has the correct credentials and passes them to the router, giving it access to the internet. And so what that is doing is it's sending deauth packets or deauthentication packets so that all the devices on that network will disconnect and it'll wait for them to reconnect so that it can see if it can catch that handshake, so that it can be transferred into what is called a PCAP file. And this is it right here. And then after you caught it, you would typically run it through a password cracker like aircrack. But that one will be shown later. And so, right there was Wi-Fi. This is actually one of the first tools that I actually learned to use. And the reason why I said earlier on that I ironically say this, that Kali is not meant for newbie Linux users, this was one of the first distributions of Linux that I actually learned how to use Linux in. And so right now we're still in monitoring mode, but to get rid of that, the process of getting out of it is much easier, because all I have to do is say Paramount ng stop, put it in on, and then it will, or at least should, reconnect me to the Wi-Fi, and get back in. Another really useful tool for hackers is a tool called Nmap. It's pretty much a CLI version. It's a much more advanced CLI version of Wireshark, pretty much. Because it has all these options for it, for what you can do and scan for. If you do -I capital R, it'll give you an output of the number of hosts. Or host discovery, you also have options whether or not to do just a regular ping scan, a TCP scan, or a much more intensive scan, which will go over multiple ports to see which ones are open. You can also ask it to try and see what operating system the system has.
You're still doing Nmap?
Hmm?
You're still on Nmap?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can can host a scan by using Nmap. And you can either do one or do multiple. So right now I'm running a scan on my own network, and I gave it the option of like trying to figure out what operating system each thing has. And actually, there's a better way to show you this. And I just told it to be verbose, which means tell us more about what it's doing. And so now it's scanning through all the connected devices to see if there's any open ports. And it does have defaults. By default, it will almost specify it will perform an intensive scan. And right now, 7 hosts are up, which that is how many devices are currently connected to mine right now.
Oh, my. Now, Joel, I don't want to rush you, but based on your time, you want to make sure you give yourself time to do your questions too.
Well,
Rapid
Okay.
fire, is it? Just like a rapid fire presentation.
we can do.
How many more slides do you have?
I was gonna talk about. I thought that's what it was. Containerization is when you basically emulate a application so that it can be used amongst various devices, but can be distributed at least from one computer. And I already talked about nodes, and Docker is the same thing as Kubernetes, which is
That's quite a bunch, isn't it? Kubernetes.
I don't believe so.
Oh.
Which is a framework, which Kubernetes is a framework that can help you which can help you do bare metal installations of clusters, which a bare metal cluster is a cluster that is clustered but doesn't use a cloud service like AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. And Tectonic is the framework designed by CoreOS to help you deploy your clusters. And now you have your questions on the
Let's
Full
write
out.
your answers on here. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize how long I was taking.
All right.
Is everybody?
Oh, I thought you were gonna read it.
Oh,
That's what I.
so, number one, why is Kali named Kali?
There, wasn't there no reason?
Yes, no reason.
So you better write your answers down. It looks like you better keep this paper. Callie was named Callie for no reason. Me. I put just because.
Yeah, that's how it works. What command is used to invoke Gentoo's package manager?
You merge, right? And, so is the ask part after it like install? Like, so it's like a merge package manager and install?
You don't have to do ask, but you can use ask to help you see what's going to be installed and ask you whether you actually want to have it installed. So it'll show you all the packages and it will say, do you want to install this? Type yes or no.
Okay.
But if you don't have ask, it'll do it anyway. Which desktop did Kali change from and which did it change to?
Wasn't it you?
Back-
Two?
Backtrack on one of them.
Oh, yeah, backtrack to Debian.
No, they changed from Ubuntu to Debian,
Oh, that's what it said.
Oh, okay.
from backtrack to Sans, which is what they call it.
Backtrack to what?
They call Kali 2.0 Sans,
Oh.
and what is CoreOS's pack? Package manager.
Isn't that just like GitHub, really? I mean, it doesn't have one, but you can use GitHub.
There is none.
Okay, so just put none on that.
And then number 5, what is the fastest penguin?
I don't think that question's gonna make the exam.
Dude,
Probably not
Gentoo, man.
Yeah, Gentoo.
Gentoos the fastest.
It was still relevant, so I thought I'd put it on there. What devices can Kali be installed
ARM processors, so like Raspberry Pi.
on? And regular desktops and USBs.
Does it have 32-bit support?
Yes.
Did you say it has to have 32 bits?
No,
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 it has
it
52.
has 32 bits. When do you install drivers in Gentoo?
That stage, what, 3 or 4?
Well,
3 if you.
just say the stage name, like, it's when you're configuring the kernel.
Okay, so the kernel configuration. By the way, after class, could you print off that slide, possibly?
This one.
And what run level reboots the system?
0.
6.
6. This one was, question 9 was supposed to be for after all of that, but I didn't realize how long I was taking. What tool did you find the most fascinating?
Dude, MMAP, man. Alright, anyway.
That's gonna be a hard question to put on the test too.
That's the whole point, see, he doesn't want you to put any of his questions.
I get to make my own up, remember?
No, I don't think that's how that works.
What kind of nodes are there on a cluster?
Yeah, master and follower.
Master and
Slow. Wait, master and what? Worker is follower, okay, worker.
They can also be called a follower.
Okay.
It can be a follower in that environment, but it can be a master slave, it can be a master worker, it can be a,
Any questions? Can any further questions?
Oh, boy.
ask some questions if you're gonna get candy
I
today.
asked you. Yeah, we had 5 already. Wait for it. By the way,
That's going on the video for sure.
So, future people watching this is.
I have a question. Why did you show 3 operating systems, and what were you originally supposed to do?
I was originally supposed to show CoreOS, and I had started trying to make the cluster somewhere early October. But as time was going on, and I was pretty much getting nowhere, and so I just asked Mrs. Todd if I could change it to Gentoo, but then she thought it would be a good idea if I also talked about and demonstrated Kali as well, and then talked about what I learned about with CoreOS.
So in 3 or 4 sentences or less, what did you learn about CoreOS?
I learned about clusters and how they work, and how nodes are determined. I also learned about the different types of clusters, whether it be a bare metal or with a cloud service. And then I learned about
Front row, are you listening?
Yes, I'm still laughing about what happened up there.
Well, listen. You learned about clusters and you learned about nodes, and what was the last thing you were trying to say?
and then I learned about
Thank you.
and I learned about how I think that's pretty much it.
3 seconds.
Well, side note to anyone in this class, we still have yet to have any student be super successful with
Yeah,
containers.
We tried to do it.
Or we've had some clusters, but they've been virtual. And so we're anxious to have our student of success come and make sure that we know how to handle a cluster and a
He's not doing
container.
clusters, he's doing
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
containers.
well, Roger knows those clusters.
I know.
I have a cluster once, so.
You're doing
It's not really a cluster, but
Joel,
Next question.
so I know you're doing a presentation in security and forensics. Are you gonna be doing showing us Kali Linux?
yes, but I'm also, but it's not gonna be over the tools I'm showing you now, it's gonna be over, forensics tools.
So how are forensics tools different than what you're showing us? I mean,
Forensics-
I don't want to go too deep, but
Forensics tools are typically used for like investigative purposes, to investigate the people who do this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Get more.
It's like,
So Joel, for the topic of ethical hacking, are there other operating systems that would do the job that Kali would do?
yes, another one, there's Parrot, and then there's also BlackArch, which BlackArch has the most tools that I've seen, which is over 1,200 for hacking tools.
What?
Does being a subtemplate affect Kali Linux at all?
I'm not sure he gets candy for that.
So he's contemplating, he's like, yeah.
So, serious question though. So Gentoo, its installation is very, 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 very similar to Arch, except for the kernel compiling, because that's an optional part. Are there any benefits to Gentoo over Arch? Just if you-
Not that I can really tell, because I've
only ever really worked with
only worked with Gentoo, really, like I've only ever actually installed Gentoo, so I don't really have a frame of reference for that.
This was the first install of this for you?
Yeah, that's why I was so happy, that's why I was so surprised and happy about Gentoo, it's because I had never done it before.
Could you go back to your slides, please? Go back to this,
Slide number 17, Joel.
more like about number 3 or 4. Whoops, go back. The one with the A and the B on it, right there.
No.
Okay, this is core, so you always have to get a frame of reference what we're talking about. And this is how you're installing the operating system, is that what it's saying, or doing updates?
I think it's talking about updates.
What are the A and the B about? Are they the memory, are they hard drive, or what are they?
I must have mislabeled them.
I got the concept that when A was busy, it went to B, and when B was busy or empty, then it would open
That
up
sounds
A.
like part of the partitioning.
Well, that's what I know, is it a partition, is it memory, what are we talking
I
about?
think it's a partition.
Okay, so not, granted, this one gave you your fit, so you may not know everything about it, but. Okay, somewhere in there also you talked about, can you go back another, I think this was Gentoo, when you were talking about the swap file and grub and your process of installing, and you were stuck on the EFI slide part because you were having trouble remembering what EFI was? Does anybody in the room know what, right there, no, go back one more. One more. Maybe, right there, first of all, the bottom line, he said something about BIOS, boot, swap, root file system partitions. And he said something about swap was where you held grub, so that it would know where it was boot. Is there any other
Yeah.
purpose perhaps swap?
Grub is installed in the BIOS, but it uses the swap partition to determine which partition it is.
Okay, I want to make clear on that. Go forward. Oh, right there, I want to ask, what's tar? Does anybody in the room know what tar is? He referenced it like you should know.
It's like a zip file.
No, we talked.
It's
We
like-
did.
it's
Well, I hope
like
somebody's
zip
awake.
file. I would-
Like a zip file, keep going forward. Bottom word down there, how do you, does anybody know how to pronounce the bottom word in the?
Locale.
Locale. I'm not picking on Joel, but it's not local, because local is without the E. Locale is the way to pronounce that. Go forward one more. Okay, right there. Put Joel on the test. Yeah, put him on the hot seat. You have a lot of acronyms on that slide. What's PPPoE? Because your audience probably doesn't know.
Proprietary.
Point protocol.
Point-to-point power over Ethernet drivers, I think is what that is. What's SMP?
Small.
I can't remember what the acronym
Simple
stands
message.
for. Simple
SMNP?
Simple message protocol.
I thought it was management protocol.
Small managed.
I don't think it's small.
Streaming message.
I can't remember what the.
Supreme.
What
Streaming
it's
message.
used for managing like, your PCR card, your PCR cards and such.
What's HID support?
Can't remember.
Okay, Dakota, your turn.
And I don't know that one.
What's GPT?
Some partitioning, right? It's partitioning.
I knew it 2 weeks ago.
Some partitioning tool.
G-part, if that's really
Oh.
G-part, but I don't know if that's G-part or not.
That's not G part.
I knew this 3 weeks ago and I made it.
And who knows what UEFI is?
Oh, that's the user interface.
Yeah, but, it stands for User Extensible Firmware.
Handle.
Interface.
It allows you to use the keyboard and mouse.
Yeah, so if you take off the user part, the EFI, it's still letting you use those things without the user pretty side, without the GUI. Extensible firmware interface is what you're trying to think of there.
Size 2.
All right, let's see, anything else on, what's an INIT file? Everybody in this room ought to know what an INIT file is.
That's an initiation of a file. So like,
It's a shortened word of initialize.
The init file, the initialize file.
Yeah, whenever you want your GUI to always come up on boot, like for Arch, I had to build one of those.
You're gonna have to create an init file to make your Linux work if you're building anything. You're gonna have one. It's like the main one, so. Okay, who else has a question for Joel? There's a lot of candy up
Can I have
there.
the rest of the candy?
No, that question doesn't count.
Did you say who created each of them? Each of the distros?
Who created each of them? Is that what you said?
God did.
I might not have said.
Through his guidance, the Rails.
I didn't say to create
It's the same,
So
Kali
reality
itself is
really
whoever
exists.
created Debian, right? And then all they did was put a bunch of tools on it, compiled it with those tools. I don't know who made all the tools, and they would have to get credit for it, but.
Good job, Joe.
Well, Julie, you beat my time.
Well, thank you, Mr. McCoy. You